After this video, you'll be drowning in new information. Hey noobs, thanks for pointing your internets toward LAGD. We're here to provide legal assistance for game developers. I'm Lauren with New Media Rights, and together we can help keep your game development from lagging behind. This episode is about your brand. You plan to eventually earn Boku bucks with your game, right? Well, once people associate your company name with good games, guess what you made? A trademark. You probably didn't even realize that you were doing it. So here are 4 things that you should know as a game developer about trademarks. Thing 1, we'll talk about what trademarks are, what they do, and most importantly, when you need to start worrying about them. Thing 2, what you should be thinking about when you decide to name your game and your company so that you don't run into trademark problems later on. Thing 3, when you should start thinking about registering your trademark and whether you can do it yourself or if you have to hire a lawyer. And finally, thing 4, how you can enforce your trademark rights even if you can't pay for a lawyer. Okay, let's take care of this first question in this video. Question 1, what are trademarks? What do they do? And when do you need to start worrying about trademark law? Pretty much as soon as you start thinking about a name for your game or your company, you're coming up with a potential trademark. Game names, company names, and logos are all protectable. Simple enough, right? Okay, let's get a little more complicated. The whole purpose of trademark law is to protect consumers from confusion, meaning the law doesn't want consumers buying one thing while thinking they're buying another. For instance, the government doesn't want situations where a random computer company can just slap on a Mac sticker onto their poor quality laptops and then start selling computers like crazy because consumers thinking they're buying a Mac product. You see what I mean? The law mostly cares about the people who are buying the products, not the people who are selling the products. So this is why you only get trademark protection when you start selling your products to consumers under that name. Until you actually start selling your game or marketing your company, your game name and company name are not trademarks. They're just legally unprotected words. But as soon as you start advertising that game so that purchasers recognize you as a game seller, then ta-da! You automatically get trademark protection. That's right! You don't have to pay for anything. You get protection automatically in every geographic area that you sell your product. So if you sell your game online, you have a strong argument that you have rights to that name throughout the country. And you can keep that protection as long as you keep selling products under that name. Good. You've got the basics now. Let's move on to question 2. What should you be thinking about when you decide to name your game and your company so that you don't run into trademark problems later on? Let's talk about 3 common sense tips first so we can get that out of the way and then talk about the 3 legal tips after that. Common sense tip number 1. Don't make your game's name confusing or difficult to find in search engines. Even if accent marks or brackets would make your game name look cool, if this is your first game, you want people to be able to find you. Let's face it, the spelling capability of the texting generation isn't exactly known for being, good. Simple, memorable names that are easy to spell and pronounce. Usually good. Hard to pronounce names and weird punctuation. Usually bad. Common sense tip number 2. Try to be unique if you can. Clearly, you want to use a name that's your own and not someone else's. Never underestimate the power of a Google search. You'd be surprised how frequently the name that you thought was very unique is already being used for all sorts of things. By the way, very unique is redundant since unique already means one of a kind. Saying very one of a kind is kind of pointless. Since you don't have the money to compete with large companies that are using the same name on medication or construction equipment, just avoid it if you can and use your own one-of-a-kind name. Common sense tip number 3. Make sure you pick a name that you're not going to totally hate in 3 years, or something that you wouldn't be embarrassed to promote. When you name something like a pet or a kid, it's not like you go back later and change the name when you think of something better. The game you're creating now may not seem like much, but after you spend a few months working on it, you'll feel like it's your very own pet or kid. So don't give it a temporary lame name since you may have trouble renaming it later. If you ever become a famous developer, people are going to want to play all of your first games decades after you make them. Keep that in mind. Moving on. Let's talk about the legal tips. For a lot of reasons you'll learn about if you keep watching these videos, there are a lot of things you can do when you pick out your company name or your game name to avoid infringing on other people's trademarks, or if you ever want to register your own trademark in the future. Here are 3 of them to close out this video. Legal tip number 1. Avoid giving your game or company a generic name. Generic means that the name literally describes what the product is. Thus, if you make a baseball game, don't just call it baseball video game. If anyone else ever named their game that, for a lot of reasons, you probably couldn't stop them. There's a reason why grocery stores are able to have their own versions of crispy rice and cornflake cereal without getting sued. There's little to no legal protection for generic names. Legal tip number 2. Don't name your game similar to another game that you're attempting to copy. If you're making a game similar to one that's already on the market, avoid choosing a name that looks or sounds similar to the already existing game. Remember, trademark law is about confusion. For instance, if you're making a game about amphibians dodging lanes of traffic, you don't want to call it Augur, iOS Frog, Mobile Frog, or even Frog in Traffic. If you do, there may be a chance that you'll be getting a letter from Konami's lawyers in the future, and your game could be taken down from wherever it's posted. And there's not much you could do about it, since your game really could cause confusion amongst consumers looking for the game Frogger. You getting it now? I know what you're thinking. You're saying in your head right now, Lauren from New Media Rights, there are tons of clones of Frogger that use the word Frogger in the title, and they don't get in trouble. You're probably Googling Frogger right now, and if you do, the first Google result actually is an unlicensed Frogger clone called Free Frogger. So how does that work? Am I just lying to you to get attention? Settle down, settle down. We're not saying that you'll get in trouble every time for making a name too similar to an existing game. We're just saying that if you want to avoid the problems up front, your best bet is to know what types of names to avoid. These companies choose the developers they want to attack pretty randomly, so you don't want to be one of those people if you can easily avoid it. Legal tip number 3. Don't be too afraid of existing names. Here's an example. Apple is a computer company that sells laptops that are silver, white, or black. Apple is also a delicious fruit that can be red, yellow, or green. Apple, the computer company, can't sue grocery stores who advertise for apples unless it could be interpreted as relating to the Apple Computer Company's products or services. Moving on, we've talked to quite a few indie game devs about their name choices and their experiences with branding. You can check out what they have to say about that in the interviews on this YouTube playlist. Check out the second part of this episode, since it's about when and if you should register a trademark, when it is and isn't worth hiring a lawyer, and the most important part, how to enforce your trademark rights if you can't afford a lawyer. Thanks again for watching LAG. Don't forget to subscribe to the New Media Rights YouTube channel and check out the other episodes. Just a reminder, we're a nonprofit and we depend on donations from people like you to offer this information and our services for free. So if you like what you heard or you like what we do, donate on our YouTube channel or at newmediarights.org.